Hi everyone, welcome to this video. In this video I just wanted to have a bit of fun really, and I saw this picture of an abandoned prison tower and I thought it would be a pretty good subject matter for the time of year. It's a bit spooky, I think. So I'm going to try and keep my talking to a minimum in this video, and I'm just going to chime in when I want to explain something particular to you. So I'm going for a loose watercolor background effect on this. So I'm using just a cheap Daler-Rowney mop brush, and I've just wet the page reasonably evenly. In this sketch I am just using a Sea Whites of Brighton watercolor sketchbook, nothing fancy, but you can see I've put those clips at the end of the page just to stop it from wrinkling too much. So if you're going to try this technique, especially in a sketchbook like this, I'd highly recommend clipping the pages down. And here I'm just using some indigo from my White Night set and a bit of Payne's Grey, and just being pretty loose, pretty splashy really. And here I'm just doing putting on the Indian Gold from that same set, the St. Petersburg White Nights. I think I used those paints throughout this video. I really love these colours together, specifically the indigo and the Indian Gold and the green. They just work really nicely together. And I'm just letting the paint do its own thing really, you know, I'm just sort of putting bits and pieces here and there, but because that page is wet, I just want the paint to just move around and blend in and kind of do its own thing. So I'm really just squinting at this photograph and just kind of seeing what the base background colours are, and then very loosely, wet and wet, trying to represent that on my page. And I thought it might be interesting to time how long it takes for this to dry. So I've set my watch and let's see. Just a quick interlude, I want to let you guys know that Sketch Your Adventures, my course on ink and watercolour travel sketching, is reopening again in December 2021. Just for a few days, so get yourself on the list. You can join that in the link below in the description. Actually, the description box is no longer below the video, at least on a computer. It's over on the right hand side. That kind of confused me, but that's just changed. So if you can't find the description, it's over on the right hand side now. But yeah, get yourself on the list and I'll let you know when it reopens and we can go from there. So as you can see, my watch said about 7.5 minutes there. I think it would have been a bit less. I think I got a bit distracted in 7 minutes. Probably something shiny distracted me, but you can see there's just a puddle of green at the bottom that didn't quite dry in that time, but that's fine. I'm just going to do my best to avoid it. And you know, I'm not being too precious about puddling and that kind of thing. It's all just going to add to the vibe of this abandoned building that I'm drawing anyway. Now unfortunately my camera stopped recording, so I didn't quite get the first few lines of the sketch on the page, but I'm using a fine liner, a 0.1, so a very thin fine liner, and I'm just using it very lightly on the page just to kind of get the rough idea of the building in. And that's because, as you'll see later, once I start piling on the layers of watercolour and thickening lines and all sorts of other things, this base drawing, you're just not really going to be able to see it too much, to be honest. So if you make a bit of a mistake like I did I didn't quite draw the roof long enough. I didn't honestly know if I was getting the proportions quite right on this, and it's probably a little shorter and fatter than what's showing in the photograph, but then that photograph orientation, or the ratio of the photograph, is a lot longer than my page, so that can always throw you off sometimes when you're sketching from a photo reference. I just kind of wanted to see what would happen. I really like this photograph, and I was like, I wonder what will happen if I try and do this in my kind of ink and watercolour style. So as I'm fond of saying, it's just an experiment, and it might work and it might not work. But I feel like a lot of wet and wet technique just really works for this subject matter and this kind of vibe that I'm going for here. And because I'm working in smaller areas, I'm just using my one of my favourite brushes, which is the Rosemary & Co. Travel Dagger Brush. I think it's a 1/4 inch travel dagger brush. I will link it in the description. I know quite a few people have bought this brush on my recommendation, and pretty much everyone loves it. I haven't heard any bad feedback yet. So, and then this is the other Rosemary & Co. brush I have, which I really don't use very often, to be honest. I'm not as big a fan of this one, which is interesting because I know Liz Steele uses this brush almost all the time. I can't quite get on with it, but I think for some reason I thought I'd give it a whirl in this sketch, but it's not one I reach for, to be honest. And this is the bigger dagger brush. I forget what size it is. Hang on, I've got it here. It's the 1/2 inch Rosemary & Co. Sable Blend Series 772. I'll link it in the description below. As I said, Liz Steele uses it like 98% of the time, but I don't really get on with it. But I do love the smaller travel dagger brush. So it's very much a case of just layering in the sort of base colours and then just building up the layers, really. So it does require a bit of patience. And at one point I did think the whole sketch had gotten away from me a bit, to be honest with you, but I persevered, and I think that's also another important skill to have when you're doing something like this, is just persevere, just keep going with it. And you know, if you end up overworking it, then you know, that's fine, and at least you tried. Sometimes these things work out, sometimes they don't, and as you do more and more sketches, your hit rate becomes better as you figure out what works and what doesn't work each time. So here I am getting out my uni pin. I think this is a 0. No, I think it's actually a 0.2. Sometimes when there's tools just scattered around you, you're like, oh, maybe actually I'll try this. I do think the fountain pen glides over the page, especially when you've already painted. I think it comes back over the paint with a nice, more consistent line, and the ink is nice and thicker. And you gotta be careful with the fine liners because they've got those, like, I guess they're almost like a felt kind of tip or something on the end. So especially if you're using them on rougher textured paper or over paint, you can actually wear down that tip quite quickly. So you do have to be a little bit careful of that. So here I made a rough attempt at putting in some bricks, and then I abandoned that because I had another idea, which you'll see towards the end of this sketch. And now I'm using my secret weapons, the tools that I alluded to in one of my previous videos, which is the Faber-Castell Pit Artist pens. And then I'm jumping around like a crazy person here. Now I've got my black brush pen. I think that's the Pentel pocket brush. And now I'm back to the Faber-Castell Pit Artist pens. I said I wasn't going to talk too much through this, and I always end up talking too much. So you can always mute me if you don't want the commentary. But yeah, jumping around massively and then jumping back to the paint. To be honest, this is how I sketch. Some people are more methodical, but I kind of go with my intuition. I'm like, what does it need? Oh, it needs this. Oh, and I float from like pen to a bit of marker to a bit of watercolor. And that's what I was trying to do in this sketch. I was just playing and just like, what does it need now? You know, and I wasn't scared just to jump between materials. So, you know, never think you've got to do all the pen work first and then all the painting and then this and then that. You know, jump around and just grab things and play. So yeah, I've decided to come back in on this left side of the tower because it is more in shadow on the photo. And I had this idea that I would do the bricks in a different way. So you'll see that in a minute. I also like this building is a bit decrepit and dirty and whatnot, so I kind of wanted to get that, relay that into it as well. And you know, I keep picking up different tools to try and get the contrast into the building because I wasn't happy with the level of contrast. So I just wanted to get like those darker darks, you know, and I was just kept reaching for different tools, trying to figure out what was going to give me that punch that I wanted in the sketch. So here again, I'm making that side darker because it's not standing out enough from the other side of the building. And I'm getting my white gouache out here. Now this is just my Winsor & Newton gouache because I've got these very tiny paintbrushes that this company called Zen Art sent me, and I was like, I haven't really tried those yet, and my Posca marker is not really behaving itself at the moment, and I didn't think the white gel pen could give me as nice a effect as the white gouache, so I thought I'd have a go. And actually with the dry brushing on a bit of gouache, it really actually, yeah, it gets those whites back in again. So again, the contrast, you know, the dark darks and the bright brights, that's what I was trying to go for. And always, you know, in the foreground is like your thicker, heavier, darker things, and then in the distance is like fainter, lighter things. That really gives you a sense of depth. So this was my grand plan for the bricks on the front of the tower there, is to come in with my white gel pen and draw the bricks in that way. And I've got to say, guys, I really like it. I'm glad I made this decision. It wasn't working for me trying out the black lines, but the white gel pen on top of this really, I think, just gave it that last finishing touch, which made it look really good. So I'm not going to draw any bricks on the other side of the tower. I'm just leaving it to this face of the tower just to make it really kind of stand out quite nicely. So I'm quite a fan of how this came out. I mean, again, the proportions aren't quite right, and I can see a few things that maybe I should have added in. I quite like these white gel pen grass lines in the front there. They're quite nice, and I do like those bricks as well. So I hope this has been enjoyable for you, just to check out, just something a bit different, a bit spooky as well in time for Halloween. And yeah, do check out some of my other line and wash demonstrations that I have on the channel, and add your name to the waitlist for my course, Sketchy Adventures, and I will see you in the next video.